Welcome back to the Institute for Swedenborg Studies at Bryn College. I'm Grant Schnarr, professor of religion, and this course is on the afterlife. Today we will be talking about the daily life of heaven. Anything from the government in heaven to what clothes they wear. So let's get going. So in talking about the daily life of angels, one of the first things I want to look at, and Swedenborg talks about, is the concept of time and space in the other world. Or you might even say the lack of the concept of time and space in the other world. People who have the near-death experience have talked about that time seems not to exist, that space, there seems to be no problem for them to go from one place to another instantaneously down the hall or into another building even, things like that. Swedenborg talks about the same kind of thing, no sense of time or space. Let's look at time first and what he says. Even though things keep happening in sequence and progressing in heaven the way they do in the world, still angels have no notion or concept of time and space. The lack is so complete that they simply do not know what time and space are. Now that sounds like they're in some kind of catatonic state. This is not what Swedenborg means. He means that there is no clock there that they are adhering to. It's not like, I can only do this for an hour and then, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon or anything like that. That's gone. There is no rising and setting of the sun. As we've seen, that happens according to what's going on inside of them. So that concept of this is taking so long or whatever isn't there. It only exists according to what's going on inside of them. Let me read you one more quote. Angels are incapable of having any concept of time, but have a concept of state instead. There's still a progression that's going on, but it's what's inside of them. Now, I want you to think about this because it makes sense even in our own lives. Think about time. If you're doing something that's a lot of fun, what happens? Time flies. It goes right by. Now, if you're doing something really boring, like I could sit here and talk very slowly and read to you, you'd be like, come on. Time slows way down. I remember we had a professor in school, I'm not going to identify where, but he would just come in and grab his, and he would just read to us for 50 minutes, just read like this. And then the bell would sound and he'd just keep on reading. And I remember one day, one of the students put an alarm clock in his podium and it went off, when time was up. And he just kept on reading along. But I tell you what, those classes were more than 50 minutes, I swear. We all would think they were probably felt like 3 hours, right? But they were just 50 minutes because it wasn't very enjoyable. So we could see how time is irrelevant when it comes to how we feel inside. And imagine in the other world where there are no clocks at all. It's all according to how long do you want to do something. You just do it. There's state of mind. And you can do that forever. Now, here's one of the things that's interesting that Swedenborg talks about. He says that angels don't think of eternity in the same way as people do. He says people think of eternity as infinite time. And he says angels think of it as infinite state. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you're a kid, maybe you've thought about this. Heaven, it goes on day after day after day after day after day. It's going to be so boring. They don't think like that. It's not a matter of how much time. I'm infinitely going to go on. That feels boring. But it's infinite state. Now, if you wanted to put, I'll say it, but they're in the eternal now. Okay, it's always right now, and it feels alive all the time. So it's something apart from time and space is what they are feeling. Now, I want to talk about what people who have had the near-death experience actually have said, because there's a lot in Life After Life talking about this idea of no time or time being different. Listen to this from Life After Life. I didn't even have any sense of time myself. Another says, at this point, I kind of lost my sense of time. Another one. It seemed as though time were standing still. And one more, time really wasn't an element And yet it was. I think that's what's kind of interesting about, like, there's still progression of states. Time wasn't really an element here, and yet there was still a progression. You know, the people that talk about a near-death experience, they say there's no sense of time, but there's still a progression from what they see, from meeting friends and relatives to the being of light, review. There's still a progression that's going on there. And then Moody just ends by saying, almost everyone remarks upon the timelessness of this out-of-body state. Many say that although they must describe their interlude in the spiritual body in temporal terms, since human language is temporal, time was not really an element of their experience as it is in physical life. Now let me say a word about space, a little bit more about that. Like I said, people in the near-death experience felt there were no limits to where they could go or how quickly they would get somewhere. Swedenborg also talks about not just time, but space, how far distance is according to our state of mind within. He says in Afterlife, page 90, even though everything in heaven appears to be located in space, just like in our world, again, it looks similar, still angels have no notion or concept of location and space. All motion in the other world is the effect of changes of inner state, to the point that motion is nothing but change of state. He goes on to explain this about our inner state when talking about people who are close to each other, love each other. Curtis Childs, I'm sure we saw it or we're going to see it, talks about, if you're asked, how close are you to your father? You're not going to answer, oh, I'm 345 miles away or whatever. No, he's talking about something inside. And so Swedenborg talks about that. When we're close to somebody inside, we love somebody, we're close to them in the spiritual world. They're right there with us. When we think of somebody and desire somebody to be with us, love will bring people together. I know, there's even songs about love will bring us together, but it's actually true. So that's why we talk about how close am I to somebody, or really I'm not that close to that person or whatever. We're talking spiritually. And so our changes of state are a matter of how we are feeling, how active our love is in what we're doing or want to do. I want to say something about that. Love brings presence. Swedenborg also talks about that if you really hate somebody, that will also bring them present. You're like, well, what? It's funny, as students, it's always, on an exam, it's like, true or false, love will bring presence. And they'll go, yes. Hate will bring presence. Oh, I'm not so sure. Yeah, because think about it. You're still thinking intently upon someone. So if you really hate somebody, you have them in mind all the time. You think, oh, that person, well, they did this to me, and I'm so angry at them, and you just can't get it out of your mind. You are drawing them to you. So imagine you're in the spiritual world, and you're, thinking about something and how much, and, they don't like, and boom, there they are. Wow. Well, I think maybe besides it just being sort of how spiritual physics works, I think at the same time, there's got to be a use in that, and maybe that use is that you got to work it out. It comes together, there they are, you're going to work it out or whatever. Otherwise, poof, they disappear again. So it's not a good thing to hate. It may backfire on you. So wouldn't do that. The other thing about the distance in the afterlife, talking about how, he says the more you, in heaven, the more you want to be somewhere with someone, the faster you'll get there. But the further away if you don't want to be somewhere but you need to go, it's going to take you a long time. Or if you're going into a state of mind that you're not very familiar with, it's like taking a journey. So if you're going to be talking to somebody that's not that similar to you, it'll take a journey to get to them, to get to their home. Whereas if it's somebody with a lot of similarities in love, boom, you're right there. I have one example of this. I don't think it's a perfect example, but it struck me. I was in my office, this was a few years ago, and this guy that I knew in school comes and knocks on the door. He's all excited, and he was a scientist, philosopher, physics type of guy. I mean, wow, I'm not. Okay. Well, he came in and he was all excited. He had written this book. And it was, he's talking about pages after pages, comparing Swedenborg stuff to philosophy, to psychology, to physics, to religion, to science. And so he was going on and on about this stuff. And I'm going, I'm listening, but it was so far out. I said, I can hear his words, but I have no clue what he's saying. It was so weird. Anyway, so he had to go somewhere, and we promised that we would get together for coffee the next day. What I had to do was, in my mind, I felt myself in preparing to go and be with this guy the next day, going on a journey. I need to get myself in a place, in a different place completely, to be able to understand, at the very least, appreciate some of what he's saying, if I want to be a good charitable person, if I want to get something out of it. So it really felt like I had to go on a journey to get there, even though I was only going probably a couple hundred yards from my office to go get a cup of coffee over at the, where you get coffee. So that was one time for me. It really felt like I'd go on a long journey just simply to go be able to talk to somebody who was just very different than me. So that's it. Time and space really are according to our states of mind. Now, again, Off the Left Eye has a really short but a really great video. So let's see that. And it's called Distance in the Afterlife.
So somebody came up to me and they were like, "How close are you to your father?" And I said, "Oh, man, about 640 miles. That's not what they're looking for, is it? They want to know how we feel about each other. Swedenborg wrote that a lot of the idioms we use, although we don't realize it, actually originate in our subconscious knowledge of how the spiritual world, or the afterlife, works. There, how close people are emotionally literally dictates how much distance is between them. So someone that you're at odds with, ideologically and personally, isn't just going to stumble across your path. You repel each other, like opposing magnets. But if there's somebody you like and you both wanted to talk, they would suddenly show up at your door. This also applies to communities of people. Those who can live together in harmony are drawn by this principle into neighboring towns and cities, while those who would clash are separated by great distances. So in the afterlife, the people that you're close to, you know what I mean?